Larry Snell, United States Army Artillery, Vietnam 66 to 67. Spent time, most of the time at the Rockpile. Well, we were based at the Rockpile mainly. It's just a big mountain-looking thing, so everybody called it the Rockpile, because it's all rocks. And next to it was what they call the Razorback, because it looked like the back of a dinosaur, kind of sloped down. So that's where we were. They moved us into. Yeah, it was a cemetery, believe it or not. We dug up quite a few bones. Yeah, when we got there. Yeah, we were digging in the guns. We were doing it by hand most of the time, and we started digging up bones. And first we thought they were animal bones, but we found out real quick it wasn't. So we boxed them and gave them back to the village of Dong Ha, plus a little money with it to be reburied, but I doubt if they reburied them. To be honest, I don't think they did. Right. But we did what we had to do. That's the thing about it over there. You did what you had to do. And we did it. Didn't like it, but we had one guy that really didn't like it. He said you could send him back, do whatever you want. He's not digging any more bones. And he's a nice kid. Really, he was a back boy, and he was really, into something like that. He said his mama would never let him back in the house if she found out he desecrated a grave, which he didn't know it. We were just doing what we were told. You weren't going to get him to do it again. No way.
And did they respect that?
Yeah. No, they gave him no problem. They put him on some other detail, do something else. So with that, I respect that, because, you got to respect people no matter what you're doing. You're in a war or you're at a car wash. Respect the other person. That's what it's all about. And we did. You don't often get that back, but you can't control what the other fellow did. You just do it. You do what you know is right in your heart and your mind, and you just go with it. And that we tried to instill that over there. There was a lot of people didn't even want us there, wanted nothing to do with us. But yet there was a bunch that did. So what do? You can't filter them. You just do what you were told to do over there. Go about your business. We took each we tried to stay away from the general population, because we had our agenda was we fight a war, and the war did not incumbent the people. We tried to be friendly with them, especially kids. The kids always pay the price. The kids are kids. I don't care where you are, here, Mexico, they're all kids. And they were funny, some of them, and always wanted to see a GI. The only reason they wanted to see the GI is they got the candy. We had candy in our deal, and we give them the candy. So they loved it. Some of them, didn't, but most of them did. I enlisted right straight out of school. Completed 10th grade. Living with my brother, and he was having a hard time. He had his wife and little girl. So I talked to him, and I said, why don't I just, this summer, when school's out, I'm 17, let me go in the Army. He said, well, if that's what you want to do. I said, well, I think it's best for me and you. And it worked out. So I enlisted, and I was sent to Germany first. And I was in Germany when they called me up. Like a lot of the others came from Germany and bigger. I was on a 175 unit in Germany. Trained there, knew all about it. 18 years old, they made me a corporal. Sent me over back to Fort Sill. And then that's when we started training the guys. And all of them were drafted. Great bunch of guys. I'd go back with them. If they told me I had to load up and go back with them, I would. They're great guys. People don't understand what it's like. You got a job, you got a family, and all of a sudden you get a tap on the shoulder. Hey, you got to go over here and do this. And I was around all of them. You may have found a handful at the most cry, bellyache, and complain, but for the most part, they did what they've done all their lives. They did the honorable thing and showed it. They never cried, complained. They made the most of the situation. And all of them did it. I was in a battery with guys from Captain Marchbank all the way down to the cook. They did what they had to do. That's why we survived it. Most of the guys that I know here, we were on the same battery, but right now we're getting less and less. And most of them were New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, places like that when they started showing up. Of course, I was from Florida originally. I didn't know most of them, no, I didn't know any of them. And just became friends, real good friends, because, you know, when you sleep together, you eat together, you fight together, walk together, and all that, you get pretty close. And I was real close to B batteries, what I was in. To me, we had a heck of a firing battalion. They called for fire support, they got it quick. And that's what the Marines love, because we were in total support of the Marines. And they loved our accuracy, our quickness. So one of the guys, he passed away about 2 years ago. He was my assistant gunner. He said he could barely hear, and the lady at the hospital, wherever he went, said, "Well, why didn't you have ear protection?" He said, "Lady, how am I going to hear the enemy if I got my ears blocked?" He said, "That's kind of stupid." Oh, well, I didn't think of that. I said, "Well, we did." So you weigh the difference, you know, you either go with this or you go with it. One might be permanent, so you go with the one that ain't. We slept right under the howitzer sometime, right there, the howitzer's here, and we were sleeping right there, and that gun go off, and it'll wake you up, but that's part of it. And, you know, it's like, you don't know what you're gonna face till you face it. And every day was different. We get called up sometimes in the middle of the night, fire, you know, so you gotta get up and you gotta aim that howitzer and you gotta go for it and hope you hit the target. But most of that came from FDC, which we had one of the best FDC sections in it. Our guys would give us the numbers right on it. So we hit 99% of the time we probably hit the target. It's like, you know, we saved 8 Marines' lives because our captain, Marshbank, they said he was gung-ho. Well, when the fire mission came in, he jumped up real quick and said, "B battery will do it." So it came in base piece, 5 rounds. That was my gun. And I knew it had to be something, because we don't normally get a 5 round for one gun right away. That's usually, you know, a lot. The first round is fired by whoever the exec would be. He would say fired, then the other 4 would have been fired on my command, because I was the gunner. Once I had it stabilized and ready, we just fired them, and they were gone. And it worked out. It saved their lives. Something that I personally and my guys were pretty proud of. That's the bad thing to me. They kind of took a dump on us. Myself and one of my cannoneers, he lost his left eye with a booby trap round that I opened. It had a grenade on it, and they didn't give us a Purple Heart. I've been trying for over 50 years. And they keep coming back with stupid stuff, you know. Yeah, it's a jungle pack, they call it. It was metal, keeps the moisture off of it and all. So in it is the round on one end, and on the other end you got your powder bags and a canister, just like a big bullet, you know. You put a 30-30 round in a weapon, you got this part, you got this part, you know. It's what it looked like, but it's big. And you dump it out, and it's wrapped in tar paper, and it has yellow ribbons. You pull them yellow ribbons, this end falls off and that end falls off, and you got your round. Well, it wouldn't come out. And he hollered at me. His name was Roland Larry. And he says, "Hey, Bob, it won't come out." And I said, "Give it to me." We used to bounce them. You bounce them on the head and it pops open. Well, it wouldn't do it. So he was a little bit bigger than me. I was a little guy. And he held it between his legs. He said, "Open it." And I twisted it. And when I twisted it, it was just a matter of a couple seconds. It twisted and popped up when he did it. The round did not go off. If it was, I wouldn't be here. The powder bags did, all 7, because they were not in a canister. And they blew up, blew his left eye out, cut him all the way to his feet. They airlifted him to Da Nang, where he spent time at the hospital ship. Then from there to Walter Reed. And I can't understand how that man did not get a Purple Heart, that whole thing. He could go from the battlefield to a hospital, one eye gone, stitches all up it, and nobody gave him nothing. And I have tried over and over. I was slammed up against the howitzer. Suffered a concussion with, well, you can see multiple powder burns from in the powder. But they don't want to do it. I've tried and tried. It just doesn't do any good. They don't care, I guess, because we're, Vietnam veterans. But they didn't want to do it. It's just, it's just that's part of what we had to go through.
Right.
Not just in country, but when we got out of it. Same thing, but you lived it, you kind of throw it over your shoulder and say, hey, I got more important things to do now. But I still have, when my boys were growing up, they always asked, Daddy, why didn't you get this and get that? I say, the whys and the whos, I don't have any idea. So we just go about what we got, boys. That's all you can do. Yeah, I never did for a while until I started going to the VA hospital. And I didn't even know nothing about this PTSD stuff. I knew I couldn't sleep at night because I could always see Larry staggering with his eye hanging out and falling. And this guy with 3rd Marines, he was a sniper. He lived not far from me, where I live. And we met. Some guy said, you need to meet Gunny. Gunny that's the nickname they gave him. He was about like a big Indian. He looked like a tall Indian. And Gunny got me one day. He said, I'm going to take you to the VA with me. And he took him up there and he went up to the doctor. He said, this guy's got PTSD. He was where I was. I got it. And he said, I'm going to tell you, he's got it. And it all just escalated from that point. I didn't know what it was. I knew I couldn't sleep, always in trouble. They didn't jump right on it back then. I took 5 tests by 5 different doctors. They brought them in from Waco, everywhere. And finally, after that, they gave me a disability rating and said, because I think one thing, because I was so young. See, I was 19 when the round went off, when the powder bag went off. Then I turned 20 a month after that. And then March, April, May, 3 months after that, I came home. So it was all kind of, 67 was a bang, bang, bang year for me. It went pretty quick. Yeah, it all started January and February, and then we had February, right after we saved those 8 Marines, we almost got overrun. Got close. We called it, some guys said it was a plateau, but it was a Rockpile. And we were, I'd say attacked. They had the Chinese, the Viet Cong, and the NVA. All 3 came at us. But luckily, they couldn't come from the back. They had to come from the front. And it was a scary time. But when we had to open up with them howitzers, once the Marines got out of the way, it didn't take long. And my assistant gunner chose for a detail. When he got back, I said, what was the detail? He said, man, we loaded 2 5-ton trucks of enemy bodies and took them down there. They dug a hole with a dozer, the Marines did, and just dumped them in the hole. I said, you kidding, Larry? He said, no, I'm not. He said, I don't ever want to see another dead body. So I said, oh my God. I didn't get on that. That's cool. I didn't want to do that. That was a mess. And the guy that lost today, he was from up north in Rhode Island. He always called me Snorkel Kell instead of Corporal Snell, till I got my sergeant stripes. He was a good boy. They're all good guys. They're fun. Dennis Hoffman, he was our driver. He passed away years ago. He told me when he said, Larry, when that fire mission came in, you guys were trying to open that round. I got up from the front of the gun, and he said that thing went off, and I thought you were dead because he said you were flopping. You looked like a rag doll till you hit that deal. And he said I ran real quick, and then Callender was already there and had you up. He said, oh my God, he ain't dead. I said, really? Yeah, I saw him immediately to Maryland. Good guy. Well, all the guys were my best friends, really. Sure. Well, Larry, my assistant gunner, he and his wife lived in Lawton when they let him bring his wife there. They just got married when he got drafted. And he would take me to their apartment. I said, Larry, you don't need me to go to your apartment. He ain't been married that long. Yeah, but Mama said I need to bring you out for a meal. You don't need to eat this stuff. Every weekend, he'd drag me up there. And we went through the whole thing together. And about, it must have been 15 years ago now, maybe more, we had a reunion in Oklahoma. And it was the first one that I went to and him. My wife was with me. She said, now how are you going to know him? I said, oh, I know him. Won't be no mistake. She said, you ain't seen him for 40 years. I said, I will know him. He walked through that door. When I said, there he is right there. And what was really strange is when Captain Marshbank, we used to take our boys on a vacation whenever we could back home to Florida. And there was a stop at Bonifay, Florida. We always stopped and fed them, and then they'd go to sleep, and then I'd drive the rest of the way, and they wouldn't bug me. And I was sitting at that restaurant, and this family, a man, woman, and kids came in. And I was looking at them, I said, I know that guy. I said, how you know that guy? You know, you're 1,000 miles from home, and you don't know where he's from. I said, I don't know, but I know him. And she said, nah, you couldn't know him. Well, we were checking out. He was at an angle, and I kept looking at him. And it was eating me up. She said, look, it's going to drive you crazy. Go over there. And I did. And I excused myself, for interrupting. And he said, yeah, what's the matter? I said, well, nothing's the matter, but maybe you just have that face that, you look everybody. I said, but I know you. He looked at me and he says, well, sit down, let's find out how. And there was a couple of similarities there. I used to haul oil field pipe, and he worked in the oil field industry, and no, not that. And it dawned on him, I said, what'd you say your name was? He said, Jerry Marshbank. And I liked the ball. I said, you were Captain Marshbank. Sergeant Snell. I said, yeah. He said, oh my God. This guy was 6 foot something, and I'm 5'6". He grabbed me like a baby, and he said, I often wonder what happened when you got off the howitzer. I said, well, here I am. Oh, we probably spent an hour and a half there. He was on vacation. He lived in Louisiana. Wow. And I said, yeah, we're down here on vacation. He says, isn't that strange? We just happened to stop here for dinner with the kids. He had 2 boys and a girl. I said, I knew you when you came in. I just couldn't put the name on it until he told me Jerry Marshbank. Well, that didn't ring because it was always Captain Marshbank. And then Jerry Marshbank. I said, oh my God, I know who it is. And it got all over him. He said, oh my God. He said, you're the first one from the unit that I have run into just out of nowhere. But he was a heck of a leader. He was the best. What he called soldiers officer, what they call him, that's what he was. He told some of the NCOs and all, when he took over at Fort Sill when we got there, he called us all in. And he told him right there, he said, we are going to have the best battery in this whole battalion. And he says, if we don't, he said, I will feel like a failure. Not you, but me. And he said, I don't fail at anything. And he didn't. Kind of guy was about 6'6", big old boy. Yeah, the battalion's still at Fort Sill. And there was a Lieutenant Colonel Chastain was there, commander one time, and I went there from time to time checking it out. They always treated us like royalty when we got there. Well, it was strange because I asked him, I said, why is the 1st and the 40th still here and a basic training unit? He said, you don't know? No, if I knew, I wouldn't have asked you. And he said, well, the way the Army works, he said, you always see something about the 101st Airborne and this and that. Yeah. He says, the 1st and the 40th was highly decorated. And he said, you were the most decorated artillery unit in Vietnam. I said, really? And he said, they can't get rid of you. So they made a basic training because they don't have the 105 anymore like that. I said, you're going to be kidding me. He said, no. He said, I'm not. He said, that's why I got a job, because of what you guys did in Vietnam. So, well, you fire almost 1 million rounds in 3 years, the unit did. So that's a lot of rounds, a lot of work. Well, we were the first unit to ever fire into North Vietnam. We were right on the DMZ, and we did have targets in North Vietnam. Of course, 90% of the time, we don't know what the target is. We just get the coordinates, and we fire it, and it's gone, It could be a McDonald's on 2nd Avenue, we don't know. But That's not for us to know. What we know is where it's going and when. Yeah, usually you get the first firings through base piece. That's why they call it base piece. And then if there's an adjustment to be made, the base piece will make it. Then they'll give the deflection quadrant, and then they'll say fire so many rounds, whatever. We fired, like I said, 886 rounds that night to save the Marine. It was the first time during the war that we had a nighttime resupply of ammo. Our guys had to drive in hostile territory. I think it was about 12 miles. I think it said 12 miles to Dongha, the area, J.J. Carroll. Get the ammo, load it, and come back at night in hostile territory. But it worked. Everybody worked together. I wouldn't change a thing. You know, maybe some of the chow, but that's about it. But the cook, our cook is here today. And he told me something I paid no attention to, because when you're involved in a fire mission like that, everything else is just
Trivial.
And he said, well, you know, I went to make some coffee, and Captain Marchbank said, no, I don't want any coffee. Make soup. I said, soup? He said, yeah, you guys had soup all night. I said, I don't remember it. He said, yeah, I made soup. I said, oh, okay. He said, Captain Marchbank said, you guys are going to need nourishment, not coffee. He said, they'll be awake. Don't worry about them being awake. But we got to take care of the other end. Yeah. Well, the young people now, I don't really think they've had the guidance to understand what a veteran is. You know, they don't understand that, they don't understand how critical it is to have veterans, to have your military, to have a man or woman now that will stand up, take a M16 now, whatever they got, and say, no, you're not doing that in my front door. My kids mean that too much to me. If they did, there'd probably be less problems. But they don't care. I love my kids. Well, my kids ain't kids anymore, they're full grown. But I got a lot of grandkids that way. But kids today, and no fault of the kid, I still believe it's parenting. But that's just me. You know, hell, I'm an old man, so what do I know? Yeah, it's different. It's a lot different. But you still have to remember, this is your country. Men like me, for years, not just, I'm talking way back, have fought to keep it our country. And it's not the politicians, it's nobody else's, it's ours. And it's up to us to see that this country is taken care of. If I have to put a weapon on at 78 years old and do it, I'll do it. That's just the way it is. You got to do it. Because there's always somebody trying to get in the food basket. You know, and if you don't stop them, they'll do it. So the young people got to understand they need to step up. Because like I said, we're old men. You know, and I'll guarantee you, the guys I went with, if they were called up, you wouldn't be able to stop them. They got heart disease, they got bad legs, knees, everything. But they'll strap that gun on and they will meet you at the boat. And that's what these kids have to understand. It's your country now. We're leaving. And we've done all we can do. Now it's your turn. Stand up and be a parent to your country. Your country is it's more than anything anybody can say. You know? It's more than politics. It's more than religion. It's more than the guy next door with a bad attitude. It is your life. Your life is what you make it. You can live in Missouri, you can live in Iowa, I don't care where you live. It's your country as a whole. Yeah, and if you don't love it and try to help it, you are the reason for its fault, not its. And credit, you know, people say, well, I'll take credit for it. For what? Your country is, it's your nurture. You got to take care of it. Right. You know, they say, well, I got a garden, I take care of it. That's not the same thing. Right. I've always been that. I've loved my country ever since I was a kid, you know. I grew up that way. And I had a brother that was a Marine. He went to, I think he was in Korea, and he spent his time in the Marines. But no, I'm real passionate about this country. You know, and it's like I say, the opportunities are there. Yeah, but you have got to keep that to where it is there. If you don't, it's going to be gone. And if you don't want it, what are you going to do? You know, you've got to stay put and stand up and say, this is our country. This is my square of the land if I have to. And I will stand here till you knock me off of it. And you're going to have a hard time knocking me off. And that's about all you can do. They haven't learned yet that nothing's free. And if you want it, you either got to get up 4 o'clock in the morning and go to work, or sit on your butt and do nothing. And then you'll find you won't get it. But the guys that I went over with, like I said, they all had families, they had jobs, but they never complained. It was, they felt, well, my country called me up, here I am. Well, Captain Marshbank played football at Oklahoma, and he turned down a pro contract to join the service. So that's the kind of guy that we were with. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's a lot, really. It may not sound like it, but it was. But he wanted to be a leader, I guess, but he was. And he had 2 boys. One was in the Air Force, I think, and he wrecked his helicopter crashed. So he got medically discharged. And got a wonderful family, wife. She understood. And she sometimes would get a little aggravated because she said, well, these young women nowadays, all they do is complain. She says, suck it up and take care of your kids. Your husband ain't home. She would get mad. He said, that's what I did. He said, I had 3 kids and he's over playing soldier. What do you want me to do? No, they know how I am. You know, they know I'm an honorary old fart. What are you going to do? You know, here comes the old man, you know. But that's part of it. You know, they grow up, go out. You know, I got, I think 16 grandkids and 16 great-grandkids.
Wow.
Yeah, I got 1 granddaughter, got 7 kids. And I love them all, but man, when they're all together, I gotta go. We love them all, though. I'm trying to teach them that this is their country now. You got to take care of it, because we're on our way out here.